Picture a city at dusk, deep in the rainforest of Central America. Great stone pyramids rise straight out of the canopy, painted deep red, catching the last of the sun. Below them, broad plazas fan out, crowded with tens of thousands of people. And at the very heart of it, in the shadow doorway of the highest temple, a single lamp glows a soft violet. Because there, a king, who is also a god, is preparing to speak to the heavens. Now picture that same city 3 centuries later. The plazas are silent. The palaces stand empty. And the jungle has climbed the pyramids and pulled them back down into the green. This is the Maya collapse, and it is one of the most misunderstood stories in all of history. You already know how the story usually goes. They vanished. They mysteriously disappeared. Some people will even tell you it was aliens or a curse. Almost none of that is true. They didn't vanish, and it wasn't sudden. The Maya spent 150 years slowly cornering themselves until the god kings could no longer make it rain. And their 7 million descendants are still here to tell it. This is not the story of a people who disappeared. It is the story of a system that failed, one slow wound at a time. And by the end, you will understand it better than almost anyone who has ever repeated the myth.
To understand how far they fell, you first have to see how high they had climbed. The Maya were never a single empire under one crown. They were a brilliant, quarrelsome constellation of city-states, dozens of them, scattered across the forests and lowlands of what we now call southern Mexico and northern Central America. Their golden age, the stretch scholars call the Late Classic, ran through roughly the 7th and 8th centuries of the Common Era, and it was extraordinary. They raised towering pyramids and sprawling plaster palaces with no metal tools, no wheel, and no draft animals. They carved their own history into tall standing stones called stelae, using the only complete writing system ever invented in the ancient Americas, a true script that could record a king's name, his ancestors, and his deeds. And they were astonishing watchers of the sky. In their folding books of bark paper, they tracked the planet Venus with such patience that their tables stayed accurate to within about a single day across 500 years. They were also far more numerous than we ever imagined. The great city of Tikal alone may have held around 50,000 people. And in 2018, a laser survey stripped the jungle away from the map and revealed something staggering. An estimated 7 to 11 million people packed across the central lowlands at the classic peak. These were among the largest, densest cities anywhere in the world of their day.
So when did it all end? And this is exactly where the second myth falls apart. The word suddenly, because there was nothing sudden about it. The Maya cities did not go dark in a single night or even a single year. They failed, one at a time, staggered across roughly 150 years, from about the middle of the 8th century into the 10th. One city would empty out while its neighbor still thrived. And it did not strike everywhere. This was a catastrophe of the southern and central lowlands, the rainforest heartland. Far to the north, in the drier Yucatan, other Maya cities like Chichen Itza would actually rise to their greatest glory afterward. The Maya world did not end. Its center of gravity simply moved. But in that southern heartland, the losses were staggering. In the worst-hit regions, scholars estimate that 80 to 90% of the population was gone within about a century, some through death, and many simply by walking away. One historian called it one of the most profound social and demographic catastrophes in all of human history, and it left an eerie fingerprint. The Maya kings loved to carve dates into stone, and then, across the southern lowlands, those dates simply stop. Tikal's last dated monument was raised in the year 869. The very last one anywhere was carved at a city called Tonina in 909. After that, silence. The clock stops. So what breaks a civilization this advanced and breaks it this slowly?
The answer is not one thing. It is a chain of things, each one making the next one worse. And strangely, the chain begins with success. By the late Classic, the Maya heartland was crowded, those millions of people packed onto land that was never easy to farm. To feed everyone, the Maya became master farmers. They cut terraces into the hillsides. They drained and raised fields out of the wetlands. They coaxed every possible harvest out of a thin tropical soil. And for a long time, it worked beautifully. But there is a hidden danger in that kind of success. A society that farms right up to the very edge of what its land can bear has no cushion left, no slack, no margin for a bad year. In good times, that razor's edge feeds millions. But it means that when something finally goes wrong, when the rains falter or the soil gives out, there is nothing held in reserve to fall back on. The Maya had built a magnificent house with no room to spare and filled every corner of it. Prosperity itself had quietly eaten their margin for error. And the ground that house stood on was about to shift.
The first thing to go wrong, they did to themselves. A city of stone and plaster is hungry for wood. The Maya needed timber to build, firewood to cook, and above all, enormous amounts of fuel to burn limestone down into the brilliant white plaster that coated their pyramids and plazas. And so, across the centuries, they cleared the forest, farm by farm and city by city, until the great canopy was broken wide open. We can actually read this in the mud at the bottom of their lakes. In those buried layers, the pollen of forest trees fades away, replaced some 1,200 years ago by the pollen of weeds and cornfields. And when you strip the trees from the land begins to bleed. Rain washed the bare soil down the hillsides. Geologists still find a thick band of eroded clay in the old lake beds, so distinctive they call it the Maya clay. But there may have been an even crueler twist. A leading study suggests that by clearing so much of their forest, the Maya may have changed their own weather. Bare ground reflects more heat and holds less moisture, and the model suggests this could have made the coming drought hotter and drier still. The exact size of that effect is still argued over. But if it is right, then the Maya helped to dig the very pit they were about to fall into. Because a drought was coming, and not an ordinary one. This is the part modern science has cracked wide open. And it did not come from digging up cities. It came from reading the diary of the sky itself, written in stone and in mud. Deep inside a cave in Belize, a stalagmite grew drop by patient drop for centuries, and the chemistry of each layer records how much rain fell above it. At the bottom of a lake in the Yucatan, a mineral called gypsum forms only when the water shrinks and turns salty, the signature of a hard drought. And in the seafloor off Venezuela, layers of sediment preserve a year-by-year record of wet years and dry. Read side by side, these three archives tell the same grim story. Beginning around the 9th century, the Maya lowlands were struck by some of the worst droughts in 2,000 years. And they came in punishing waves, clustered around the years 810, 860, and 910. Those dates line up almost exactly with the three great phases of the collapse. And a study published in 2018 put hard numbers on just how severe it was. By measuring that gypsum in the lake, researchers estimated that annual rainfall fell by roughly 40 to 50%, and in the very worst stretches by as much as 70%. Imagine losing half of your rain for decades at a time on land that already had no margin left to give. Now put yourself inside one of those cities as the rains keep failing and the granaries run low. Your neighbors are in exactly the same desperate state. And remember, the Maya were never one people under one king. They were dozens of rival kingdoms, proud and jealous, and they had been fighting each other for centuries.
two great powers towered over all the rest, Tikal and its bitter rival Kalakmul, the seat of a royal line known as the Snake Dynasty. For generations, these two superpowers waged a slow, grinding war for supremacy. Not always face to face, but through a whole web of smaller cities pressured into taking sides. And as the good times ran out, the fighting did not ease off. It got worse. Wars over land, water, and trade routes intensified through the 8th century, burning up the very resources the cities needed just to survive. In one southern region, around a city called Dos Pilas, archaeologists found something chilling. In their final years, the people there threw up hasty defensive walls, tearing apart their own palaces and temples for the stone to build them. And then, not long after, that whole region emptied out almost completely. Scarcity fed the war, and the war fed the scarcity, and the wheel spun faster and faster. It became the cruelest kind of trap, the kind where every ruler's rational choice made the whole world a little worse.
And so we come to the last thread, the one holding everything else together. To understand why the Maya cities didn't just shrink, but truly shattered, you have to understand who their kings really were. A Maya king was not merely a ruler. He was a Kuhul Ajau, a holy lord, a living bridge between his people and the gods. His most sacred duty, the very thing that justified his palace and his crown, was to keep the cosmos in balance and, above all, to bring the rain. Through elaborate ritual, through fasting and offerings and the shedding of his own blood, he was the one who kept the world turning. Now think about what a drought lasting decades does to a belief like that. The entire promise of a god king is that he can deliver. And here were kings performing every ritual, making every offering, and still the sky stayed shut. Year after year, the rains did not come. Scholars argue that this is where the deepest part of the collapse happened, not in the fields, but in the mind. When the king could no longer make it rain, the reason to obey him, to feed him, to build for him, to believe in him, simply dissolved. The keystone was pulled, and the whole arch came down. No single cause explains the Maya collapse. Not the drought alone, not the war, not the felled forests, not the crowding. It was all of them at once, feeding on one another, a cascade. And even now, in the 2020s, scholars still debate exactly how much weight to give each cause, sharpening the picture, never overturning it. So the great cities of the southern lowlands fell quiet, and the jungle took them back. But here is the part the myth always leaves out, the part that matters most. The Maya did not vanish. Even as the south went dark, the northern cities of the Yucatan, like Chichen Itza, were rising into a golden age of their own. In fact, the very last independent Maya kingdom, an island city on a jungle lake called Nochpeten, did not fall until the year 1697. That is roughly 175 years after the Aztec capital fell to Spain. It was the last unconquered native kingdom in all of the Americas. But the story does not end there. The Maya are not a lost people, they are a living one. Today, more than 7 million Maya are alive in southern Mexico, in Guatemala, in Belize, in Honduras, and in El Salvador. Around 6 million of them still speak a Maya language, and there are more than 30 of those languages spoken out loud every single day. The descendants of the god kings are farmers and teachers, weavers and engineers, keeping tongues older than Latin alive in the very lands their ancestors once ruled. The Maya collapse is not a ghost story about a people who disappeared. It is a warning that any society, however advanced, is only as strong as the margin it keeps and the trust that holds it together. Spend both at once, and even a people who can read the stars can lose the power to feed themselves. But the people endure. They always do. Next time on Myths and History, another story that history got wrong, a truth buried for centuries under legend. Until then, if you want to understand how the world really worked, and how in so many ways it still does, stay with us and subscribe. The Codex closes. Until the